This graph here represents our final position at the end of the 8-year simulation as per the final score relative. As you can see here, we are Team Chester in 4th place with 19.8 points.
The 3 products that we introduced throughout the simulation were cake, cookie, and candy. This is the perceptual map at the end of the 8 rounds. Cake was our longest running and most successful product throughout the entire simulation. It was well positioned at the beginning half of the game because it was the top selling product in the low-tech market for rounds 2, 3, and 4. It started getting older after that, but at the end of the game we repositioned it so that it was again the top selling product in round 8.
Our second product, Cookie, was introduced to the market in round 3. We only sold half of its inventory that beginning round, however, sales did increase over the next few rounds as we repositioned it. Our third and final product, Candy, was introduced to the market in round 6. We did slightly position it off the diagonal line, which we believe to be the cause that has negatively impacted our sales. We entered the simulation with the initial strategy of dominating the low-tech segment. Our company wanted to control a large portion of the market share by becoming the total cost leader. We wanted to accomplish this by making an abundance of sales with low prices. We also wanted to release a new product every year for the first 5 years, but we soon discovered that we didn't have enough money.
We invested a large amount of our money into total quality management. Specific segments of TQM that we thought were the most effective for our company were CPI systems, channel support systems, and UNEP green programs. We decided to invest into these 3 programs as they lowered material cost and increased consumer demand the most.
We were aware that the pricing of our product would be a significant decision that would affect our overall success within the market. As a result, we approached this problem carefully using reverse psychology. For example, instead of $30, our opponents might price their product at $29.99, 1 cent lower. Knowing this, we might price our product at $29.98 or $29.97 in hopes of attracting a larger customer base.
There's the moment we need it most. Oh my God! You kick up the leaves and the magic is lost. Yay! Tell me your blue skies fade to gray. Tell me your passions are I don't need no care, no. 'Cause you had a bad day. You take it one down.
This graph is from our Foundation Fast Track after 3 rounds. At the end of the 3rd round, we learned a valuable lesson where we realized we were headed towards bankruptcy due to our negative net income, low ratings, high debt, and low stock price that had plummeted to the lowest point possible. Considering the margin goal is 30% as set by Capsim, our contribution margin of 19% was well below the average due to the low prices we had set our products, in which we did not make enough profit on each product sold. In addition to the $33 million emergency loan, our profits were negative.
We tried to undercut our opponents through low pricing, which eventually backfired. By not pricing our products effectively, we ended with inadequate margins. Another thing we didn't do so well on was inventory forecasting, which negatively affected our overall performance. For example, in round 3 alone, we lost $18 million from keeping leftover inventory.
After the 3rd Foundation Fast Track came out, we were all devastated by the results. We realized that if we continued with our current strategy, our cumulative profit by the end of round 8 would be in the negatives. To find a solution for our problem, we contacted our TA, Ziming. He was a very insightful and knowledgeable person, and he gave us many tips and recommendations.
Although we are in the low-tech segment and price did matter the most, our sales price for the first 3 rounds were low enough to allow us to dominate the market share. However, a problem that rose up to this was that our expenses were too high and the money that we made per unit was not enough to cover these expenses. So Ziming suggested that we increase our sales price so we can cover our expenses and generate more money.
The second recommendation that Ziming gave us was to use a sales forecast. What this allowed us to do was to use our estimated income statement and our estimated balance sheet to review our decisions and make sure that the numbers at the very end would be in the positives. He also taught us to use a formula to estimate how many products to produce for the following year. And this was really important because in the third round, we overproduced by $18 million, and this really hit us hard. Lastly, Ziming suggested that we continue to borrow as much money as we can to cover our debt. He also suggested that we avoid any long-term debt, since the interest rate was much higher than the current debt interest rate. In addition, having more money on hand would help us avoid any future emergency loans.
After we took in all his recommendations, you could see that our scores in the final analysis report almost doubled in round 4, and it slowly increased all the way to the end of round 8.
After completing the Capsim simulation, we have come up with 3 main recommendations for the incoming management team.
Our first recommendation is to invest more money into TQM. Although this is something that we did throughout the simulation, we believe as a team that if we had the opportunity to complete this simulation again, we would invest more of our resources into this avenue. To be the best, you have to learn from the best, and we identified Ferris and Anders as the 2 top teams in our industry. After round 2, which is the first time that any team in our industry invested in TQM, we invested $1,600 while they invested $6,000 and $6,090 respectively. TQM can help to do many things, such as increasing demand and lowering material, labor, and administrative costs. The long-term benefits of TQM far outweigh the short-run costs.
Whereas we would recommend investing in TQM, we would not recommend investing in automation. What we found is over the long term, 8 years, automation did not pay off. Not only was it not beneficial, but it's actually detrimental to our products. When we tried to reposition our products, we found that the ones that had the most automation installed took the longest to come out in the next season.
Our third and final recommendation for an incoming management team would be to put more products to market. Our original goal as the management team for Chester was to put 1 new product to market for each of the beginning 5 years, a goal that we failed to complete. For the majority of the simulation, we had 2 products, cake and cookie, in the low-tech segment, while we added another one, candy, later on in the game. We often compared ourselves throughout the simulation to Corporation Digby because we felt ourselves to be relatively similar to them in terms of profit. In the final round, they surpassed us, in part we believe to them having 5 products to market to our 3.
Those are our recommendations. We also learned some important lessons, not necessarily about Capsim, but about business in general.
The first lesson we learned has to deal with the importance of detail. We wanted to keep the long-term health of our organization a priority, but we believe that sometimes we did so at the expense of our short-term objectives. As a management team, we were so focused on where we would be in 8 years that sometimes we forgot to think about where we would be next year. We realize now, for this project and every other project going forward in Queen's Commerce, that you have to put in the time and the effort for all the small details so that it leads to a great project. A house of cards can't be built if any one card is broken.
Our second lesson was that communication is key. We found that when we had a scheduled due date weekly, it was important that we communicated with each other and met regularly. We also found it important to communicate with our TEAs. As Locke talked about earlier, we went to Ziming for help. Communication is also important in person. When we became more comfortable with each other after we bonded, it was easier to throw out ideas and more progress was made. How we bonded? Well, that's another story.
And that is the story of how Chester got 4th place in a Capsim simulation. In week 1, these 5 adventurous Queen students set foot in a very different path with no idea what to expect. Little did they know about the long, hard journey ahead of them. Once they started, however, there was no turning back. Week by week, they battled through the endless waves of unhappy customers and opposing industries. After spending many gruesome nights in the dungeons of Goods Hall, these 5 Queen students were ready to take on the business world. Although the realm of censors was a dangerous one, Team Chester eventually prevailed. There is no doubt that these 5 will meet again someday to reminisce the sentimental memories of Capsim. However, their destinies are set in stone, and they must head their separate ways. Until they meet again.